Jarmut Gorharla and Med Sean New, Margal ar na mílta duine a léirí a dul, go solar ar na stráideanna agus sna pobal. The day has been brought about, Taoiseach, by the will of the people, and their demand has been very clear. It's for this additional water charge to be scrapped. So today is not about the government having a road to Damascus conversion. It's not about the government being part of a genuine democratic revolution. It's not about the government trying to find relief from the water tax for hard-pressed households. What your proposals today are about is giving the government a lifeline, not about relieving the pressure on those who cannot pay water charges. And the government has built up today's announcement for the last number of weeks. You were engaged in a PR offensive and a desperate attempt to cling to seats in the next election. So this is a tactical U-turn by a government which has made U-turning part of your modus operandi. Citizens can take strength that we've turned you, but you and we know that you still have some distance to go. And even today, despite all your preparatory work, 2 cabinet meetings in the course of this day, you made a complete mess of this debate. The Taoiseach and the Taoiseach have refused to answer straightforward questions for months now, and you rationalised this by saying there was going to be a full debate. But once again, the government's arrogance kicked in. The Taoiseach and the Taoiseach left, as did the Minister for the Environment, Alan Kelly, after he had made his speech and before the opposition had the opportunity to respond. It took the opposition to withdraw before the Minister returned to be part of the debate. But after all the hype, here's what we now know. After today's announcement, it's clear the government has not scrapped water charges. The water metering programme will continue. Metered charges are coming in. There's still no constitutional right to water. We also know the penalties. If a household fails to register with Irish Water, they will receive a default bill of €260 per annum per dwelling. In addition, such households will not be entitled to the €100 water conservation grant. And by the way, the water conservation grant is vintage stroke politics, dodgy accountancy allied to the politics of carrot and stick. A bill on the one hand and a rebate on the other hand. And what kind of economics is that? It also will not be operational for some time beyond September 2015. Legislation will be introduced allowing landlords to deduct water charges from their tenants' deposits, and there will be a statutory charge on a dwelling in respect of unpaid water charges. There will be penalties for those who do not pay after a year. A single adult household will face a €30 penalty, and €60 will apply to other households. Now, the Taoiseach says the capped charge will be in place until 2018. But the Taoiseach knows that once water charges are in place, they will only go in one direction. They will only go up. That has been the history of all these charges. The government did have the opportunity. Sorry, Taoiseach.
Sorry, Deputy, I was looking at my notes here.
No, that's all right.
Yeah, you okay?
Okay.
Deputy Adams.
Stuart took a road to a guest, Jack, so Peter Huss led the hull. Well, Neil Shiv. Okay, Margaret. Tásorgam ní róta a géis Jack. Sin an 5 leis an réaltas. Tá tú ag Catalánach níl tú a géis Jack to Scarby. And the government did have the opportunity, to get rid of water charges. Sinn Féin has shown how this can be done and how it can be paid for. The government has refused to get rid of water charges. And that's why we need the maximum possible turnout and protest against water charges on December the 10th to deliver home the message once and for all that water charges must be scrapped. Today's exercise is an attempt to quell the unprecedented levels of protests that the government has been facing. It does show that people power, peaceful demonstration, mass mobilisation is working. It also shows that this Right to Water protest campaign must continue. Now, the government says it's been listening to the people who are opposed to water charges. But you know, if you really were listening, that the people weren't asking for a package to sweeten the deal. They were asking for the charges to be scrapped. Dur and Tyra, Kelly, nor Higgin Pobble, Igart, Shin Bolskaracht, Durche, nor Quill, nor Hig and Pobble, Igart, Chorus, Natali, B and Pobble, Mar Amadon, Shin Agat. This patronizing dribble, which is also repeated in the legislation, shows the government's attitude to citizens. It says, and you claim, that the public do not understand the charging regime. How stupid are the people? They don't understand the charging regime. They do understand the charging regime. It's you who don't understand the people. And from the very outset, your government's establishment of Irish Water and your efforts to impose domestic water charges has been a complete and utter fiasco. And remember, this was a Fianna Fáil idea agreed between that party and the Troika. But I listened very intently to the Taoiseach when she was making her remarks earlier, and she was defending and promoting and arguing for these water charges. She neglected to say or to explain how during the 2011 general election campaign, the introduction of the water charges was one of Fine Gael's 6 key policy areas, which the Labour Party said they would not allow to be brought in. It featured prominently and famously in their famous Tesco ad, "Every little bit hurts." So could the Taoiseach not just have taken a moment or two to explain her U-turn on that issue? The new government, led by Enda Kenny, did not have to implement the deal done by Fianna Fáil and the Troika. Teachta Martin is right about that. But not only did you implement it, you rushed it through the Dáil, you ignored opposition amendments. Teachta Stanley put forward dozens of amendments, dozens. You never accepted even one. Not even one amendment was accepted by the government. That's arrogance for you. In fact, you caused an unprecedented walkout by all the opposition TDs just before Christmas, and you repeated that again for today. And let's remember this. All the Fine Gael, Teachta Dáil, all the Labour Teachta Dáil voted for the legislation which you introduced here and which you have now hollowed out. And they're going to march again through the lobbies later on today, voting for exactly the same thing. And all the fine self-congratulatory praise that you heaped upon yourselves was echoed in that debate just before Christmas. In fact, the whole Irish Water saga has been marked by a series of debacles. It took John Tierney, the Irish Water CEO, on a radio programme, I think it was Sean O'Rourke, to acknowledge that 50 million of the establishment cost of Irish Water had gone into the pockets of consultants. Political reform, that was never divulged here. So much for transparency, so much for accountability. And then it later emerged that the real figure was 86 million. And this entire fiasco has been a waste of public money. The taxpayers' money, Paddy's money, the money belonging to the people. Mr. Tierney subsequently revealed to the Public Accounts Committee that Irish Water staff would receive bonuses of up to 10% of their salaries. And last weekend it was revealed that some staff would qualify for bonuses of up to 19%. Now, Phil, former Minister of Environment Phil Hogan, is now safely in Europe. And it's clear that he was aware of all of this while he was Minister, although he has since denied it. So, you'll also know, because it was raised here by me and others, that many citizens were deeply disturbed when Irish Water began demanding their PPS numbers. But the government wouldn't listen. You simply knocked back any suggestion from us or any concern that was being raised. It was reported last month that Irish Water sent 6,239 letters with incorrect names to customers. And the letters had ironically asked customers to confirm their personal details, but had gone to the wrong addresses. A very serious data breach. And just yesterday, another data breach at Irish Water emerged. The Office of Data Protection Commissioner has confirmed 10 cases whereby an Irish Water customer had their bank account details sent to their landlord in mistake. And again, the government wouldn't listen. So don't expect, Taoiseach, the citizens out there to thank you for climbing down on this PPS issue. And by the way, I use the term citizen very, very consciously. I listen to Labour and others. They talk about customers, they talk about clients, they talk about job seekers. These are people who have citizenship. This is supposed to be a republic, and as of a birthright, citizens should have rights. So, Irish Water is the government's Frankenstein creation, characterised by excessive spending on consultants, bonuses and cronyism in the manner in which it was established and its management to date. And it's been a non-mitigated disaster. Now, the Taoiseach says that the opposition has no alternative to the vision of Irish Water. Taoiseach, you should sack your speech writer. If this is your vision, then God help us all. Even government TDs have wakened up to this reality. The Minister who introduced water charges legislation, Fine Gael TD, Fergus O'Dowd, eventually, after you stood him down, this man who went out valiantly defending your party and your government every time he was asked, was shafted. He then went on to acknowledge that Irish Water has objectively failed. He described it as arrogant, uncaring, a cosseted quango with a bonus culture and a non-mitigated disaster. And Owen Murphy, Fine Gael TD, has accused the government of having manipulated and abused the Dáil in the way you ran through legislation establishing Irish Water. He also says that the credibility of Irish Water lies in tatters. Marred in scandal since its inception, it's now a toxic brand. And any proposal, Taoiseach, to leave this company with responsibility for the delivery of water services in this state is not creditable. It should be abolished. Indeed, Irish Water has become synonymous with everything that's wrong with this Fine Gael Labour government. Cronyism, political manipulation of state boards, which would make even Fianna Fáil blush, boards and threats to citizens, and escalating taxes on struggling families. So you can no longer hide behind the Troika for their decisions. You can no longer blame the big lads. You can't say that the big boys made you do it. And waving a piece of blank paper at me in an infantile way proves nothing. So Taoiseach, you deal, and your government deals in an entirely compliant way with the elites in this society and in the European Union, and particularly in the banking fraternity. And you treat ordinary citizens and dis Oireachtas with contempt. And I tried to figure it all out quite a few times, just the almost benign arrogance that comes from exercising power, because you don't need, you see, to consult us. So you don't consult us. The sensible thing would have been to come in here and had the discussion and picked up maybe some of the good ideas from some of the other TDs here and incorporated them to have the debate, to have the discussion, and then of course do whatever you wish to do, as opposed to what we've seen time and time and time again is coming in with a fait accompli, using the guillotine, pushing and using your majority with incredible arrogance. Now, you also attack, I listened to some of what you talk about when you talk about cherishing the children of the nation equally. You attack the welfare of vulnerable citizens. You cut back on the entitlements, the protections, the guarantees that hard-working families, that elderly people, that people in rural Ireland should have. You cut back on their public services. You impose tax after punitive tax. You cut citizens' rights. You don't even recognise that citizens have rights. You've cut child benefit, medical cards, the respite grant, the respite care grant. I could give you a list as long as my arms of the punitive measures that you have introduced. And what you need to understand is this, you see, Taoiseach. Citizens are sick to the teeth of relentless austerity, of being patronised, of the endless list of taxes and charges aimed at those in low and middle incomes. And for them, for many of them, your water tax is the final straw. And that's why we have seen the huge numbers of citizens on the streets and protesting within communities. And to be honest, the numbers of people on the streets surprised us all. And the big important thing about it, as someone who's been involved in street protests right back from the civil rights days, it was spontaneous and it was organic. And that's what's dangerous, because the people have eventually risen up. They haven't been organised, they haven't been rent-a-mobbed, they have been out there because that was the straw that broke their back. So, you claim that you don't envisage the privatisation of water services. That's true. Why don't you support the 34th Amendment of the Constitutional Bill 2014, which Sinn Féin has brought forward? It seeks to ensure the rights of all persons to safe, sufficient and accessible water, and that all water services and infrastructure remain in public ownership. Why don't you support it? Why not? You know that any move to privatise water would ensure even greater charges for consumers than those already suggested. In the North, you often mention the North, and usually in a disparaging way to score or try to score some strange political point. We prevented the introduction of water charges. We stood up to the Tory government in London, and we prevented the privatisation of water services, and we will continue to do so. The constitutional amendment bill put forward by Dr. Stanley allows for a referendum to retain control of water services and public ownership. Are you afraid of the people? Do you not want to give the people a say? Do you not want to say to the people, we trust you to take a good decision on this issue? No, you don't. And there's been no satisfactory explanation of your reluctance to hold a referendum on water ownership, beyond the fact that Fine Gael are the political champions of privatisation, and it's Fine Gael writ Taoiseach that runs this coalition. It's Fine Gael that runs this government. Labour are there as an appendage. So, there's a reason for all your twisting, all your turning, all your contradictory statements, all the leaking and spinning and kite flying about all the figures that were put forward, and it's very, very clear. You completely underestimated the determination of ordinary citizens to resist the imposition of water charges, and you've been forced to turn, to back off, to hollow out. You've been forced to back down again and again on your plans. But you've dismissed, you patronise people. It's offensive. You dismiss, you talk down to citizens. You dismiss their real concerns, because what they have said very, very, very clearly is abolish water charges, guarantee the right for water. The mass demonstrations haven't been about demanding a lowering of the amount that you intend to charge. The people haven't asked you to give them sweeteners or to bring forward bribes. And the response from yourself, from the Taoiseach, has been absolutely mind-boggling. You persist in ignoring the reality. Gumleskal Shasu, Shasu Tan Turner Lumsa, Jas, Gumleskal, Shasu, no, Shasu Gumleskal, Tam Aaron Turner, Tassokum. You ignore the fact that many, many families cannot afford to pay. And they're taken to the streets and they're saying to you, you can't force us into this. We're part of the Right to Water campaign. It's a fantastic example of a grassroots people's movement. And there's no place in this for the type of treatment meted out to the Taoiseach. There's no place in this for physical or violent approaches. Anybody who isn't prepared to behave peacefully should not turn up at any demonstration. And it's also no surprise that the government inflates these incidents in order to deflect attention from the central issue, because the demonstrations I've been on, and the ones in my own county and here in Dublin, but in Louth and Drogheda and Ardee, have been family-friendly, have been good-humoured, there's been a lot of cover, and they've been very, very peaceful. So I want to, for Crick Arma Óráid, and to call again, the RTE report, Caharniach, cited that the Sinn Féin stewards tried to get the demonstrators off the road, as had been committed to before the demonstration. That's what happened in Sligo. The Taoiseach's bound to know that. But anyway, having said that, I want to appeal again for the biggest possible mobilisation on December the 10th to demonstrate the continued widespread opposition to water charges and this government's opposition to it. And perhaps you will join the people that day, and then you can't say, you can't hear what they're saying.
Now, the next speaking slot is shared by Deputies Joe Higgins, Mick Wallace and Joan Collins.